Okay, so remember that they're changing my voice. This is Psalm 18 of David. That's what it's titled, of David, the servant of the Lord. He sang to the Lord the words of this song when the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. So he's singing praises to God about God delivering him by giving him warrior strength, by giving him martial arts skills, so to speak, except for in the story, again, which is superimposed on the reality of martial arts. It's about, they're using armor and swords and so on and so forth. But again, that's why it's called the armor of God, right? It's not literal armor. It's spiritual armor. Mind, body, soul, spirit. Not mind, body, soul, spirit in armor with arrows and sling stones and slingshots and chariots, but spirit. Notice there's no argument being made for spirit in battle in the wordplay, because even the people who made the wordplay knew it was preposterous for some tyrant to send an army to war, and then claim that it proves that God's on his side. That's not the same thing. That's why Goliath called David out to single combat, and he accepted. Everyone there agreed that that was a sound argument, the single combat instead of everyone having to fight. Nobody protested that. Saul was stressing about who he's going to send, not whether or not it was fair for him to do that. But we can all agree that it wouldn't be fair for the Romans to say to Jesus, keep in mind the miracles are figurative, right? It wouldn't be fair for the Romans to say to Jesus that he should raise an army and whoever wins should be in charge. That's not fair. And neither is it fair for the American government and anyone else to say, well, you can't overthrow us. Okay? That's just stupid, right? Okay. So, Psalm 18. I love you, Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I call to the Lord, who is worthy of praise, and I've been saved from my enemies. So he's calling to God specifically for combat. So it's mind, body, soul, spirit. Like I called to God with my prayers, with my action, with my heart, all my life. And God honored my family and their generational righteousness by making me the top martial artist ever possible, by forming me in my mother's womb with my father's RNA expression, dominant gene expression, to reward me and the good works of my tribe, because it historically takes a community to raise a child. But they're in rebellion against me. So anyone, including people from my father's tribe who don't obey God through me, they're not going to go to heaven. As harsh as it might seem, it's more harsh for them to say to God that they're not going to obey him in a life that God allowed them to have. Okay. So, again, I called to the Lord, who is worthy of praise, and I have been saved from my enemies. Notice he's referred to as a horn, which is a pattern in nature, right? The horn of my salvation, my stronghold in verse 2, which is a pattern in nature, just like a rock that helps you understand martial arts, right? You're better off with a rock-hard body than a soft one? Yes. Is a horn similar to a spearhead? Is it similar to a knife, a sword? Yes. It's a pattern of nature that shows that God's a warrior. When we look at the different types of horns and antlers and teeth and claw, yes. The cords of death entangled me. The torrents of destruction overwhelmed me. The cords of the grave coiled around me. The snares of death confronted me. In my distress I called to the Lord. I cried to my God for help. From his temple he heard my voice. My cry came before him into his ears. The earth trembled and quaked, and the foundations of the mountains shook. They trembled because he was angry. Okay, so before I read verse 8, let's go down to verse 26 so you can understand it. Verse 26 says, to the pure you show yourself pure, but to the devious you show yourself shrewd. So if God has dark rain clouds under his feet instead of majestic ones, divine ones, not fairy ones, because fairy is also evil, but majestic ones, right? Divine ones, not magic, but, in terms of glorious ones, really glorious ones. Okay. Is it shrewd? Yes. It's not evil. He's handing the enemies of David and the enemies of God, first and foremost the enemies of God, over to destruction. But the dark rain clouds don't symbolize God being magically evil. He's not. Okay, so smoke rose from his nostrils, consuming fire came from his mouth, burning coals blazed out of it. He parted the heavens and came down. Dark clouds were under his feet. He mounted the cherubim and flew. He soared on the wings of the wind. So now what's happening here? Is God literally coming off his throne and in a way that everyone sees him and say, what's that? Oh my gosh. Or is it figurative and spiritual? It's literal in a sense, but it's not literal. Okay. It's that I'm drawing on the Spirit of God, for example. He's talking about something that happened then. Okay. That's probably the main way to interpret it. But I'm also drawing the Spirit of God. So in a sense, God was coming into my soul and my spirit, which is also already in the Spirit of God, in a more heavy dose of it, a more potent dose of it. And there came my martial art challenge through sabotage, through fumes, through their attempts to redirect my moves, through their editing my videos, trying to confuse things, which made me wonder if I should keep doing it in the first place for, ever so briefly, but it still was part of the obstacles and the sabotage and the traps that the devil had laid. For the purpose of white, Jewish, and LGBT supremacy, for the purpose of Americanism, what have you. And they should be scrambling to make it up to me to the best of their ability, not scrambling to cover it up. That's when they finish off their offspring, when they scramble to cover up, especially if they cover it up, especially, while I'm still somewhat healthy. Because remember, the devil tries to cover up the image of God, which is one of their psyop objectives, is to prevent people from seeing the image of God in me, which is unbelievably despicable. And I don't know why the American government would be so dumb as to do that. It's hard to imagine that anyone's that dumb. And of course, they're allies, right? Obviously, Israel and the UK have their hand in it, as well as other nations and so on and so forth. They call it the New World Order for a reason. Okay. So it goes on. Okay, so it goes on to say, he makes darkness his covering, his canopy around him, the dark rain clouds of the sky. Out of the brightness of his presence, clouds advanced with hailstones and bolts of lightning. So we see a connection to Isaiah 28:17, right, where it says, righteousness and justice is the measuring line and plume line, and hail will sweep away your refuge to lie, water will overflow your hiding place. So there's a storm, there's hailstones, there's bolts of lightning, obviously rain, what have you. Now, we also see Isaiah 30, right? It connects to Psalm 18. Okay, say, for example, the whole thing, but say, for example, verse 8, where it says, smoke rose from his nostrils, consuming fire from his mouth, burning coals blazed out of it. Okay. He parted the heavens and came down. Dark clouds were under his feet. He mounted the cherubim and flew. He soared on the wings of the wind. So Isaiah 30, for example, verse 30, the Lord will cause people to hear his majestic voice and will make them see his arm coming down with raging anger and consuming fire, with cloud burst, thunderstorm, and hail. It's also why they try to make it so I sound weird or manic, because they want to take away from that, which overkills the failure of their families, of their genes, of their religions, of their nations. I mean, what kind of lowly spirits would sink to the level of making it harder for me to communicate? What kind of cursed people, what kind of people that despise their families and their offspring would sink to the level of changing the way I sound? What do they get out of it? Nothing. If people hear this video, they're going to believe me. Even if I didn't highlight that they're doing that, they would believe that they're doing that. So how does this help them? It doesn't. It just helps them destroy their offspring and themselves and their family and their nation and their religions. There's no other way to look at it. If you think there's another way to look at it, or there's another explanation, please put it, because there is none. That everything else is peanuts compared to the effect that this has, that effect that this has. So again, it says, the Lord will cause people to hear his majestic voice and will make them see his arm coming down with raging anger and consuming fire, right? His arm is coming down. It's the strikes, martial arts strikes, right? It's the essence of my martial arts strikes, not after they edit my videos, but in the reality of the situation at the time, okay? With cloud bursts, thunderstorm, and hail. And so again, going back to Psalm 18, it says, out of the brightness of his presence, cloud advanced with hailstorms and bolts of lightning. Okay. Going up to verse 8, smoke rose from his nostrils, consuming fire came from his mouth, burning coals blazed out of it. Right? It's this consuming fire. right? So his arm coming down with raging anger and consuming fire with cloudbursts, right? Clouds of smoke, for example, clouds of the collection of rain, the water of life, the water of the righteous, okay? Thunderstorm and hail. So it's talking about that martial arts strikes. That's why it's compared to an arm coming down. That's why David is said to have literally faced Goliath, okay? Because it's connected to that definitively. And we'll explain it more in the next video when I finish chapter 18.